All right, welcome back. We have a new project, mini project that we have to do to help wrap up the P-26. I've been working on it all week, a lot of problem solving, some prototyping, but I finally nailed down what I want to do. And so today we're going to talk about javelins. And I mentioned in an earlier video that I've talked about these before, what they do. There are javelins on the P-26, and it's not a tremendous amount of work, but it is a fun little detail that adds quite a bit of character. So I'm going to wrap you around the other way and show you what they look like, what the end product looks like, and then we're going to dig into this and show you every step of the process. So the airplane is upside down right now because I finished all of the ones on the top. So we're on the bottom now. The last Javelin is this one. First of all, yes, I did add a pitot tube, bent piece of aluminum tube, and I did taper the tip of it ever so slightly. And so where we're going here is we're creating the last one of these. So essentially, we're taking a rod and we're putting 3 screws in it, right? So in order to accomplish that, we have a couple of steps to make. And like I said, I'm going to take you through each step of the process, have you look over my shoulder and explain what I'm doing. That way you can replicate this if it works for your application as well. All right, I've got kind of a bit of a working place here. It's a little bit messy, so bear with me. I've got a few things going on, but suffice it to say, I do have all of the tools readily available that I need in order to accomplish all of this work. So yeah, been distracted doing a couple of other different things. I've got 3D printer running on the side here, but let's dig right in. So here is the thing. I know the length that I need. It's 4 millimeters or 4 centimeters, and I've already cut a piece of 1/8 inch hardwood dowel. Okay, so all I'm going to do is start by cutting a corresponding piece of polystyrene tubing. And the reason that I'm using the polystyrene tubing will be very evident in a minute. All right. This styrene tubing, by the way, is from Evergreen Scale Models. It's 3/16 inch tubing, and you can order it online if you don't have it in your local hobby shop. So essentially what we're doing now is we're going to get the wood dowel to be the core of this tube. So this is extra. In order to get there, I 3D printed this a long time ago. It's used for making triangle stock. You can download it on Thingiverse. But what I did do additionally is create this insert. So rather than using square stock, I can use a dowel. And the reason this is in here so tight, if I can get it out, I'll show you. The reason it's in there so tight is, if you can't see, maybe very slightly, you do have to get this sliced and put into the razor blade on the other end. The reason being is if you don't, the blade will warp and wander. And what will happen is you will get something that looks like this. The blade will wander and it won't cut it in half. We need to cut this entire tube in half the full length. Now, longer pieces, you do have to worry about rotation because it's crazy to think about, but there is a grain that kind of makes these want to wander. But otherwise, you can pretty much just pass this right through. And then I've got a 3/8 inch dowel where I can push the rest of the way through. And here we are. So now we have the tube cut in half. And now we're going to take a little bit of the medium CA Zap-A-Gap from our friends at Zap Glues. Just a little bit. And then we're going to lay this in here. We're going to apply a little bit of clamping force and let that dry. When you're using Zap-A-Gap, that's why I have these paper towels here. It's important to wipe the tip before you replace the caps. All right, so explaining the next few steps while I've got your attention here. So we are going to line this up on the wires, and then we're going to draw a couple of marks. And the reason for the marks is to know where we're going to cut the wood core. We're going to cut out grooves from the wood core so that the javelin doesn't slide fore and aft, okay? And then we're going to cut slight recesses into that further, a little bit deeper down into the styrene tubing to help account for the thickness of the wires. But it's going to be ever so slightly undersized so that when we clamp down the top piece, it's going to apply clamping force, and then lateral motion will be resolved from the screws. These are tiny little brass screws. I had to order these. These are one of the few things that I have been able to not find on McMaster Carr. I found them on Amazon. These are #1 flathead wood screws, just so they're nice and tapered, and we'll get into those more in a minute. So this should be sufficiently cured at this point. There's a little bit of extra glue. We'll wipe that off. So we will make sure that this is nice and pretty in a minute after our construction. So let's move on to sizing on the wire. All right, so these are the same on each side of the airplane. So what I'm going to do is just mark the wood like that. And that's it. All right, so I know roughly where I'm placing these. There is a slight angle, as you can see, of down this way. So I'm going to do opposite that because we're going to do a mirror image. Otherwise, it'll be pointing the wrong direction. But now I'm just going to take my razor and cut down ever so slightly into the wood just by pressing on it. Again, trying to account for that slight angle that we're going for. Okay. Now I'm going to use my razor with a #11 blade because I need a little bit more precision. So I'm just going to push it down here, and I'm going to twist to lift up this section. And with the grain, we're removing a section of the wood. So now we're going to try to use the thicker part of the blade to scrape a little bit more down to the very surface of the polystyrene. Good practice, if you're not comfortable doing this kind of precision cutting, is to make sure that you're always cutting away from yourself. All right, so now we're going to go into an edge and just carve a little tiny bit of this polystyrene away. Just a little bit. Okay, and we'll do that on the opposite side as well. This is a good option for, again, those of you who are not used to working with smaller things, holding it down on the surface. Now that we have our tiny little recess carved into our styrene, we're going to try to level this off again. Rinse and repeat on the opposite side. All right. So the next step is to make our sandwich again. You can be pretty precise about this and make sure that the cuts mark up. If you cut straight enough, it'll be okay. But if you want to take that little bit of extra time, see there's a little bit match up right there. That's a little bit better. So we'll go there. And now we're going to do our very first drill. So I'm using a tiny drill bit on my pin vise. And we're going to go right at the end. Be soft at first so that the bit doesn't wander. And then once you break through into the wood, you can apply a little more pressure. Pick it up, knowing that I'm not all the way through so that I don't stab my work surface. And now I'm going to take a larger drill bit, not that one, this one, where the drill bit is ever so slightly larger than the head of the screw. Because look, the screw's got a taper in it. So we are going to countersink our plastic. So just apply the drill bit and spin with light pressure. The sharper the drill bit, the easier this will be. And that was a little too much, but that's okay. And apply that. This is our first screw. Be careful not to stab yourself, because I have cuts all over my fingers from doing this. All right, so now we have our first screw. Now we're going to do our second screw. And our middle screw. And again, you can try to make this as even as possible, but honestly, eyeballing this is going to be plenty sufficient. But the point is to try to get these in a straight line so that they're going and at the same angle. All right, so now that we've got all of our screws in, you'll notice that as I was putting the screws in, they protrude all the way through. That's okay, but we need to remove these pokey bits and try to smooth this out so that it just looks nicer. It'll be very, very hard to see this, I admit that, but it's worth the little bit of time to make it fully nice. Let's take you over to the Dremel station. That's it. All right, so the last thing we need to do here is our final shaping. So we're gonna sand the polystyrene flush with the wood, first and foremost. Doesn't take too much pressure. You can use a pretty low grit on this too to make the cutting a lot easier. And then we're gonna take a foam sander, and notice that I'm twisting the piece as I sand. And you can do back and forth motion too, that's fine. But we're just trying to create a bevel here and soften the edges. If your javelins are more pointed, you can shape it to that amount. And it really depends on what you're doing and like how the javelins are styled, because they may be more pointed, right? And so it's important to add that amount of length that you need in order to account for that shape in your final javelin. All right, I'm pretty happy with this shape, and you can see that it's nicely blended with the wood as well. So now we get to take this and we'll put it in the paint booth. I'm going to shoot some black paint on this. I'm just using pretty flat black enamel paint, and then we'll be back for final installation. All right, so with the painted javelin in hand, we're going to disassemble. And if I'm honest, I personally, assembling these, there are a couple of scratches here and there, but I kind of like it, particularly around the screws where some of the paint chips off. It kind of gives that look like, yeah, these are serviced, these are adjusted, these are wear items, and it reflects that. It's pretty cool, pretty cool. So just to show you a little bit here, so the angle is accounted for. That's why we did it a little bit offset. And right now I'm just gonna tighten this screw a little bit, not all the way. Again, try not to stab yourself with your screwdriver. So yeah, I've got a little mark here, measured where I need on the wire, just marked with a Sharpie, a fine tip Sharpie. And so I slide it over to where it needs to be. So that one's tight, that one's tight, and that one's tight. That ain't going nowhere. So as you can see from my messed up hair, it's been a day. I've been doing other things while the paint has been drying. So I hope you guys get something out of this. This is a really fun detail that I've really enjoyed troubleshooting and trying to figure out how I want to implement on this particular model. Now, if you want to see how I implemented Javelins in like the cross direction, you can also see my my Javelin video that I did on the Curtis Falcon. That's a pretty good option too. It's a little bit more tricky, a little bit more finicky to put into place. But I do like that solution too with the O-rings and very similar kind of deal, but it takes more finagling to get it into place in setup. It's not terribly perfect, but it is pretty scale. I do like it a lot. Now, guys, I really appreciate you stopping by the shop today and learning along with me. So do yourself a favor, and if you need other hardware that's not little teeny tiny screws, but like number 2 screws or 4 screws, 6 bolts, even other things. There's tons of stuff over at Dubro.com. Do yourself a favor and use code Josh10 at checkout. I get nothing from that. It's all for you guys. Dubro's been a super awesome supporter of my channel as well as other people, and the master classes have been just an absolute blast to do. So until next time, guys, keep working on your flying works of art.